Good morning. Well, good morning for me anyway, but hello and welcome to the Transcend and Succeed show. I'm your guest host, Megan North. Firstly, I would like to thank our sponsors of the show, Quantum Awakening, Voyage of Transcendence, myself, and our amazing guest, Jeff, who paid to be featured on this episode today. And speaking of our amazing guest, today we are joined by Jeff Patterson. Jeff is from Portland, Oregon in the USA and has over 36 years of experience practicing and teaching the meditative and martial arts. As the founder of Northwest Fighting Arts, Portland Tai Chi Academy, and the Yielding Warrior, he emphasizes the transformative power of meditative and martial arts practices, particularly the yielding concept, which we will explore later in the show. Jeff has published 2 books and hundreds of instructional videos. He's the founder of the Yielding Warrior online program and has worked with he's worked with thousands of students from around the world. Welcome to the show, Jeff. I'm so happy that you're here with me today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So let's start from the beginning, Jeff. So can you share with us how you became aware of meditation and how it has transformed your life?
Yes, I was introduced to the meditative arts in a bit of a roundabout way. So as a younger guy, I was very much into Western boxing. And I used to go to a boxing gym that's just a few blocks down the street here from my academy in Portland. Mm-hmm. And at a boxing gym, if you're not familiar with how they're run, it's a lot different than your traditional style, like fitness class, where you come in and there's a teacher and all the students kind of follow along. Well, in a boxing gym, usually there's 4 or 5, 6 different coaches, and each one of those coaches has 4 or 5 fighters that they're working with. And at this particular gym, there was one coach there who had created national and world champion level fighters and was very well respected and very well known. And I really wanted him to train with me, or I wanted to get to train with him and spend some time with him. And so I would always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there. I'd work hard and try to get him to notice me. And it was about 3 or 4 months of following him around. And he finally started giving me some tips and showing me a few things. And it was only after about 2 or 3 weeks of getting to spend a little bit of time with him when he said something to me that changed my life forever in many ways, in that he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now, at the time, I was this 19-year-old kid who didn't know much of anything, thinking, isn't Tai Chi for like old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter? And I had a lot of respect for him, and I took on the practice. And not only has it changed my life in many ways, through the years, I've been running this academy now for 30 years, had over 26,000 students come through the academy alone. And I've witnessed hundreds of stories from my students on how the meditative arts has positively influenced their lives in many different ways. And that's kind of what's made me so passionate and have the energy to write my last couple books and create my online program and my teacher training program to get this message out there and try to reach more people.
And so how did the meditation and the Tai Chi work in then with you training as a boxer? Like, was it then to get you focused? Like, what was the purpose of the meditation for you at that time?
So there's many different benefits that an athlete will get from incorporating the meditative arts. Mm-hmm. And in the meditation practice, I kind of break it down into 5 directions of practice. So we have our athletic side of the practice, where people come to improve their awareness, their sensitivity, their timing, their ability to be present, their ability to improve their focus, all of these things that help them be a better athlete. Then there's the therapeutic side of the practice, which is great for improving your strength and flexibility and working through injuries and that kind of thing. And then there's the medical side of the practice, which all of Chinese medicine based off of Qigong theory. And then there is the philosophical side of the practice where people study for life virtues and strategic benefits on how to think and guide things mentally. And then lastly, there's the spiritual side of the practice, which you've been hearing about mostly with meditation, where you'll hear monks and meditation masters will practice and work towards that stage of enlightenment. And so of these 5 directions, you can incorporate the meditative arts to help in any one of those areas.
And did you find that, like, was it an instant aha moment for you when he started to open up and share these things with you in correlation with your fighting? Like, was there a difference?
There was, but it took a little bit of time. So
Okay.
I had, everything he gave me, I treated it like it was gold. And I'd do, if he told me to do an hour, I would do more. If he told me to do 100 reps, I'd do more. I'd always really try to do my best for him because I really wanted to impress him. So when we first started doing the meditation practice, he showed me the first few movements of a Tai Chi form, and this only took a couple lessons. And then he also showed me a sitting meditation, and he wanted me to do a half an hour of a sitting practice every day and a half an hour of my Tai Chi every day. And so I did this religiously, like you're brushing your teeth. I'd never missed a day. And the last thing I wanted to do was to go into the gym and have him ask me how my meditation was that day and have to tell him I didn't do it. So
Yeah.
I did it every day. And after the first couple weeks, he kind of left it up to me to do on my own. And he quit showing me anything in regards to the meditative arts and just kept working with me on my boxing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about maybe 4 months go by and he still hasn't shown me anything else. And I started getting kind of distracted and discouraged, thinking, man, is this guy ever going to teach me anything? I don't understand why I'm doing this. I was actually doing an hour and a half every day. And I'm sure he recognized that I was getting a little bit distracted. And so it was maybe at about the 6th or 7th month mark where I went down into my basement to train one day, and I remember looking up at the clock, and an hour and a half had already gone by, and it felt like 15 minutes. And something happened in that session that made me have this awareness or this realization where I just kind of got lost in time. And it was so euphoric and felt so great to have that experience that from that point on, I was hooked, and I was like, there's something here. I got to really investigate this. And it wasn't too long after that to where my main focus shifted. And now, instead of being boxing was my main focus, now the meditative arts was. And ever since then, I've been following that path and traveling around the world, training with teachers all over the planet, just trying to be a better practitioner and a better teacher.
Wow. That was a real lesson in patience and trust, wasn't it?
For sure, yes.
Yeah. And well done in the sense of, you're only 19, so you could have easily, after a couple of weeks, thought, there's nothing working, so I'm, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to keep going with this. So, and have you always been like that? Are you always one to be really disciplined, and if someone tells you to do half an hour, you do an hour? Is that the way that you were brought up, or is that just something that happened?
Not at all. When I was younger, I was very undisciplined. I was very distracted. And it wasn't until I started getting into the martial arts that I really started to change. And I found a passion. I found something that was worth holding on to. And then I realized that not only is this fun and something that I want to get good at, but all of these lessons and these characteristics and virtues, they make me a better person too. And so I started learning how to cultivate these things in all of my relationships and my personal relationship with myself and just everything that you do. And, that's kind of one of the benefits of the practice.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing. And did he was he aware of your journey after you sort of shifted your focus? Was he someone that followed your journey, and is he still someone that you really look up to?
Yes, so he quit teaching a number of years ago. He's a fair bit older. And yeah, I stayed with him and trained with him for probably 20 plus years.
Wow.
Uh, but we switched our focus and mostly did the internal arts from there forward. However, we kept up with some of the external stuff, but that was kind of the path we took going forward.
Wow, amazing. How amazing to, just come across someone in a boxing gym that, has now completely transformed your life. It's something that you wouldn't really expect, or in a way that you wouldn't expect, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I understand that you speak and teach three types of meditation. So this was new to me when you and I discussed this the other day. So there's ritual, active, and philosophical. So can you explain to us the three different types, and then why are they different?
So these are actually, I don't look at these as different types of meditation. However, they're pillars in any meditation practice. So
Mhm.
there's many different methods of meditation, from sitting and breath work and movement practices like Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga and walking meditations. I mean, there's lots of different directions you can go with meditation. But ritual, active, and philosophical methods are kind of like the pillars of the way that we practice those different avenues of meditation. So, with any practice that you cultivate, and as you start to build an evolving life practice with the meditative arts, you want to have some ritual time every day where you set time aside to do your sitting meditation or do a qigong set or your tai chi or whatever it is that you're focusing on for that time of a ritual based practice. And then we have active practices that are things that we can integrate into all of our activities when we're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store. And they could be as simple as counting out 10 breaths or doing some spinal rotations, or maybe a simple movement exercise. And they can be done in as little as 60 seconds. It's not like we need to go retire to a cave and meditate for the rest of our life. But by integrating these into our day, it allows us to start living the practice, and meditation's meant to be a way of life and less of a hobby that we do once in a while. And
Mm,
so this allows us to kind of live this mindset and this practice and this awareness in all of our activities, because it seems kind of silly if you meditate every day and you feel in this peaceful state for a half an hour, and then the rest of your day you're angry and upset and dealing with
yeah.
this and that and the other. And so we want to try to integrate these things into everything we do so we can approach it from that present place, peaceful place, and be able to make our decisions from that place of balance rather than that place of distraction.
Mm,
And then lastly, we have the philosophical side of the practice, which is very beneficial as well. And these are things that we can integrate into our ritual practices as well as our active practices. And with these three pillars, they're kind of like our foundation, our direction that we're going to take any meditation practice, no matter what path you decide to follow.
wow. And I love that. I love that there's opportunities to remind yourself that you don't just meditation. What I'm trying to say is, I'm overwhelmed saying it. I think sometimes people get really overwhelmed with thinking about how do I incorporate meditation into my life. Um, and it's a little bit the same as, when I talk to people about mental health and well-being. Well, if you don't have 10 minutes to do something, take 60 seconds to do some breath work, or to just close your eyes, or to look outside, or something like that. And I love the fact that, there's all these different ideas and practices that you can do. As you said, like if you're standing in line at the grocery store, do some breathing, because actually it's just taking that moment of standing there where don't look at your phone, actually take some breaths. And it's how do you drop those through your day that actually then can help your day as a whole, as opposed to it just being a 30-minute practice that say you have in the morning.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. And so so you mentioned, I don't know how to pronounce it. I hear it pronounced a couple of different ways, but is it Qigong?
Qigong, yes.
Qigong, right. Okay. So using Qigong meditation to have optimal performance. So you mentioned this to me the other day. So how does that play a part in optimal performance? And can you just maybe explain optimal performance? What do you mean by that?
Well, it has different meanings depending on why we're drawn to the practice. So, for example, a lot of athletes these days are seeing the benefits of meditation, and so they practice to improve their performance on the field. And, a lot of gameplay is having that ability to control your mind and be more in tune and more present. And nothing helps you with those things better than meditation. So they're incorporating these skills and understanding how to learn some of these concepts that improves their game. When Phil Jackson was coaching the Chicago Bulls and they won all their championships, he was having the players practice meditation and Tai Chi to improve their performance. And here you have, the best basketball players in the world, and they're practicing meditation and Tai Chi. And so there's definitely some validity to this because it's so widely known. And what I found and what's been really great to see is that through the last 36 years of me practicing these arts, if you go back 30 years, there was not very many people that were on board or really even believed in meditation. And now a lot more people are more open to it. And so that's kind of how we can use it for improving our physical performance, but it also improves our creativity and our ability to deal with stress in business. And so it helps us be more focused and more in tune and more balanced, where we can be more productive. And so there's just so many different ways that we can improve our performance by adopting the practice.
Have you got a success story that you could share from a student, someone that maybe was a bit about it or was a little bit, that really surprised you and how they turned their life around?
I've heard hundreds. One that kind of always stands out is this gentleman named Bill who started with me 30 years ago. He's been here. He's still here today. And when he came to me, he was in his mid 50s and he had a very high stress career, and he was literally as stiff as a 2x4. And he came in wanting to learn sword fighting. And after a couple sessions with him, I said, Bill, we really should start doing some meditation. I think it'd be great for you. And you could see after a fairly short amount of time, his whole physiology changed, his life changed. And obviously he sees the benefit of it, or he wouldn't still be here 30 years later. And, hearing and seeing those things, I've had students coming in here who have told me they were thinking about committing suicide and dealing with depression, and this practice turned their life around, and people who have helped the practice has helped them get through ailments and sicknesses. And it's just really amazing, all the stories that I've heard. And that's what's inspired me and given me the energy to really drive and build this program that I've got going right now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow. And I love that Bill is still with you. I'm not meaning in the physical world. I'm meaning like that he's still training with you, and that he's still on the journey, because it shows, doesn't it, that just because it's a little bit like you, just because at 19 you learned this, but it's a journey, isn't it? It's something that I'm sure you learn something about yourself or someone else every day that just keeps you inspired.
And the meditative arts is a very deep practice. I've been studying this not as a hobby, but as a profession for 36 years. And I'm still just a student. I'm learning all the time. It's a very deep practice, and it's not something that you can learn when you're 19. It's something that takes years and years to cultivate. However, from day one, by integrating these practices, if you do it with the correct approach, you can start reaping the benefits right out of the gate, which is very, very helpful and powerful.
And so do you still find that, you talked about when you were in your basement after about 7 months and all of a sudden an hour and a half was gone and it felt like 15 minutes. Do you equate that to then when you're in your flow? Is that how you feel through the day when you're in your flow, that the time just sort of disappears?
A lot of times when you reach that point in meditation, people will connect it and associate it with that flow in sports, that flow state that just kind of seems like everything clicks together. And I think there are a lot of correlations there and a lot of very close connections. It's almost a bit magical, if you will. You're in this place where there's no negative thoughts going on. You feel very peaceful. You're very in tune with yourself. You're not letting the past or the future get in the way. You're not letting your ego get involved. It's just a very peaceful place that is when you're very open to suggestion. So when we go into these times, we can use these times to program our thoughts to help us change things that we want to change in our life.
Yeah, wow. I love this. Okay, so much more to explore, but it feels like a right time to just have a quick break. We're going to hear from our sponsors. So we've got a couple of commercials and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. So stay tuned. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks, Jeff. We're here with Jeff Patterson and we are talking about the meditative arts. Now, Jeff, can you share with us what the 5 regulations are and how do these help us to lead a healthier life?
Yes, the 5 regulations are fundamental pillars in any meditation practice, whether it's a still practice or a movement practice that you could integrate. And they are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And briefly, I'll talk about what all 5 of these are.
Please.
So regulating the body is basically understanding your skeletal alignment, your muscular tension in the body, and learning to control that in everything we do all day, every day. With these regulations, we want to get to the point where we're regulating without regulating. And once we get to this point, that's where we're really kind of on the path. And so an example of this would be, think about a time maybe when you're sitting in front of your computer and you've been there for 3 or 4 hours, your shoulders are rounded forward, you're feeling really lethargic, maybe your neck's getting sore, and you're feeling very depleted. Well, think about another time when maybe the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and you feel energetic and you feel great. Well, we're in 100% control of these two different energetic states all day, every day. And when we can learn how to regulate the body and pay attention to this in all of our activities, we can control our physical, mental, and emotional states just by this one awareness and this one thing that we're training. And so you'll notice that with many different meditative practices, whether it's a sitting practice, a standing meditation, a movement practice, they always really focus on your alignment and your form, because you can't sit very long or do a movement practice if your skeleton's out of alignment. And so this is very important. Then the second pillar is regulating the breath. And regulating the breath is a lifelong practice. And in Qigong, they often refer to it as the science of the breath, because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies and different ways that we can use the breath to get different outcomes. And because of this, we broadly categorize these into what we call yin methods and yang methods. The yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of breathing meditations. And an example of a yin method, or it's time when our body naturally does this yin style breathing, is when we're sleeping. So if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural instinct is to have longer inhales and shorter exhales. And this is the body's natural way of bringing our conscious mind into our subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so if we want to emulate this style of breathing and learn how to bring that energy inward when we're meditating, we can lengthen the inhales, do soft retentions at the end of the inhale and shorter exhales. And this is bringing the energy inward, closer into that bone marrow, or closer to our center line. And in doing this, this is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety and panic attacks, great to improve your creativity. I mean, there's lots of benefits that you could get from this style of breathing. Then we have the yang side of the breath, which is more aggressive. And an example of this would be when you've ever had to pick up something heavy, or maybe you've had to push your car. Your natural instinct is to exhale, put tension in the breath, maybe even make the breath audible. And this helps expand and generate the energy outward. Another couple of examples of this would be if you ever cry, you'll notice that you're bringing that energy inward and you're inhaling longer than you exhale. And reverse side is when you laugh, ha, 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 ha. You're exhaling longer than you inhale, which is expanding and taking the energy outward. So when we can learn how to control the breath, we can use it to regulate our physical, mental, and emotional outcomes. You know, everybody goes through the day with emotional ups and downs. Some people like a roller coaster, others may be a little more balanced. But when you start noticing these imbalances and maybe start getting excited, you can use the breath, the yin side of the breath, to help bring it back down. And when you feel yourself starting to feel depleted, we can use the yang side of the breath to help build us back up and make us more energized. And so learning how to use the breath like this is an important strategy. And in Chinese philosophy, they call this balancing the kan and li, or the water and fire, and is, again, something that is a lifelong practice. And there's many different methods of this, but this is kind of a brief example of the breath. Then we have regulating the mind. And regulating the mind, just like the breath, is a lifelong practice and a very deep idea. And you know, one of the most common things I've heard people say when it comes to the meditative practice, people that are new coming in, is that they'll say, I've tried meditation, but I just couldn't quiet my mind. It doesn't work for me. And somewhere along the way, people got this belief that in order to be successful at meditation, that you have to be in this peaceful state of nirvana or this blissful place where nothing affects you. And I've spent the last 36 years of my life studying these practices, and I've been fortunate enough to train with some of the most amazing meditation practitioners on the planet. And I have never once met anybody who doesn't get distracted. So you need to change that mindset first. And the great thing about this is when you understand this, now say you're doing a meditation practice and you're sitting for 20 minutes or maybe doing a qigong set for 20 minutes. You may get distracted 50 times during that session. And every time you get distracted, you recognize the distraction and you use your posture, your breath, your movement to help bring you back to center. And now you just got 50 repetitions of being off center and coming back to focus. Now you do this all day or every day, every month, every year, you start to develop this sense of power and strength that almost makes you unshakable. It doesn't matter if somebody says something to you or you have a stressful day at work. You're able to use these skills and these things that we've been practicing every day to help maintain focus and balance and approach these things from a relaxed state rather than an imbalanced state. Because, we're all guilty of this. If you think about a time where you're agitated and somebody comes and asks you a question, oftentimes we don't respond the way that we would have liked to. And so when we can learn how to approach these things from a little more focus and awareness, we can often save ourselves a lot of heartache on the other side. There's this story that I really enjoy about these two old monks, and they're walking down a dirt road after a big rainstorm and everything's muddy. There's puddles everywhere. And they come up to this huge mud puddle. And on the other side of the puddle is this little girl standing there in a white dress, and she's crying. And the older monk yells across the puddle. He says, "Are you okay? Is there anything we can do to help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere. And if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." And so the older monk, he rolls up his pant legs and he walks across the puddle and picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side and sets her down, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road. And finally, the younger monk is just furious. And he says, "We're not supposed to touch girls, but yet you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down at him and says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we get 2 miles down the muddy road before we realize that, hey, we got to let this thing go. We got to adjust and come back to center. And so regulating the mind is a very valuable part of the practice as well. Now, the next regulation of regulating the energy is something that we could literally talk for hours or days on. It's a very deep practice, but I'll give you a basic understanding of it. So when you've learned how to regulate the body, the breath, and the mind, and reached a competent level in these areas, now you have the skill sets to lead the energy in the body through different circulation patterns, maybe taking it inward or expressing it outward, which is very powerful to help us get different outcomes with our practice, which in turn helps us regulate our physical, mental, and emotional states. So you can see how all of these things are kind of helping take us down the same path, right? Mm-hmm. And then lastly, we have regulating the spirit. And this is a very profound idea as well, and something that meditation teachers and monks and practitioners will spend their entire life working towards that stage of enlightenment. But as you can see, when we break these down, of these fundamental practices, when you start cultivating these areas, they can affect anything you do in life.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Oh gosh. And that I really love that example that you used, because it really does put a lot of things into perspective, doesn't it? It's amazing that what the things that we hold on to in our mind and the things that we don't let go of can, the power of the mind is incredible. If you are holding on to something that happened a couple of miles down the road, it can completely change the way that you react for the rest of the day and those sort of, whereas, the other monk was like, why are you still hanging on to that? Like, it was just, that's a really, really great example. Thank you, because that put a lot of things into perspective for me as well. So you're known as the yielding warrior. I'm just fascinated about that. So can you explain to us and me what is yielding and how is it useful in all areas of our lives?
So, yielding is a concept that's been used in the meditative and martial arts for generations. And it's something that I've always been inspired by because I've seen some great application from some very high level practitioners. And it's what motivated me to write my last book, The Yielding Warrior. And I break down yielding into three categories. There is physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm stronger than you. And now it's easy to see how this is beneficial in any kind of athletics, because oftentimes, no matter what sport you play, you're going to come up against other athletes that are bigger and stronger than you, and you're not going to be able to force your will on them and make things happen. You need to learn how to yield and get the angle you want to get or the direction you want to go with the least amount of resistance, so you can get the advantage on these people who are bigger and stronger than you. Mm-hmm. Now, in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed. The breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, it's a lifetime worth of effort to really master this skill. But from day one, by incorporating the meditative arts into our life, we start to see these things more clearly inside of ourselves. And this is where it starts to become very interesting, because now, because our awareness is heightened internally in what's going on inside of our own bodies and minds, we're also able to see these things in other people more clearly. And this is where we move into what I call mental yielding. Now, say, for example, you and I are having a conversation and I say something that unsettles you, and I pick up on it right from that first sign of imbalance. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention and pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to slap me upside the head. And so learning how to use yielding in all of your interactions is extremely powerful. One, you're just being more considerate, which is something we should all strive to do anyway. Yeah. And two, it allows you to be strategic in all of your interactions, which is very powerful in relationships, in business, in sales, and negotiations. And when you can learn how to do this, it allows you to guide conversations to where you want them to go in a positive manner with the least amount of resistance. And so this is a very important skill to learn how to develop. And then we have what I call emotional yielding, which is the third pillar. Emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but it's with your own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about, oftentimes something will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path, and we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. Yeah. But with yielding and our heightened awareness and our ability to be more present, we're able to sit back when these things happen and analyze the scenario and often make a more educated choice to save us a lot of heartache on the other side. And, I've been explaining this idea of yielding for 30 years. I've been running this academy, so many, many, many years. And one of the most common things I hear people say is, that makes a lot of sense. I use yielding all the time. And while I would agree, I think everybody uses some degree of yielding, even if they don't recognize that's what they're doing. However, it's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, that person would see things about the series of events and the timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And the meditative arts helps us see things inside of ourselves and inside of other people that I truly believe that most people will go through life and never have any clue of unless they adopt these practices into their life.
Wow. And two things that really stood out for me when you were talking about that from the yielding point of view, I think for me, being present, I think is one of I suspect one of the key things that you learn when you're yielding, because you've really got to be in that moment, don't you? You've got to really understand what's going on with you and the other person. So you have to be really present. And I would imagine too that the art of listening as well, I think, would be really powerful as well, because when
Yes.
you're present and you listen, it's amazing what you learn.
Yeah, all too often, I think we are having a conversation with people and we're all guilty of this, and they're saying something to us and we're thinking about what we want to say next, when, really, when we can learn to really listen, and not just to the words that are coming out of their mouth, but the tone and their expression and their body language and the energy behind that. It really tells us a lot more than just what the words are saying. And so that skill to be able to do that is extremely valuable.
Definitely. And something that somebody pointed out to me recently is they said that did you know that the same letters to spell listen are the same letters that you spell silent? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like, that to me, that puts everything into perspective about what listening is.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And so, Jeff, for anyone that's watching this and they're new to meditation, how do they know? Like, how do you work out what is the best practice for you? Like, where do you start? Is it just a matter of, I don't know, trying different things, or is there any tips that you give to people in your academy that are just starting out?
Yes. I usually have three things that I like every new student to really consider and think about, because there's so many distractions out there these days when we start talking about meditation. I mean, you could go onto YouTube and see a million videos on this and that. And there's all these apps of this, that, and the other. And if you try to do it on your own without a guide, you are never going to get even a small percentage of the amount accomplished as you could with somebody in your corner helping you out. I think one of the most important things to do is find somebody to help point you in the right direction. It's kind of like, if I was to take you to a basketball court and you've never witnessed the game of basketball before, you didn't know you're supposed to dribble the ball, you didn't know the ball's supposed to go in the hoop, and I say, go play basketball, you're going to be horrible. But if I give you a world-class coach and I say, go work with this person for 6 months, you can accomplish a lot with that person and you could get pretty good at the sport of basketball. Meditative arts is very similar. There's so much, I told you I've been studying for many years and I'm still learning. If you think that you can just figure it all out on your own, you're going to waste a lot of time. I've literally had students come into the academy that have tried to self-teach themselves, that have been doing the meditative practice for 15, 20 years, 10 years. And they'll come in here and they'll see somebody that's been in the practice for a year and they'll get a little discouraged because they're farther along in many ways than they are. And, all of that time and energy, we're all limited on our time. We're limited on the time that we're here on this planet, and your time is valuable. And so having somebody that can save you all of that effort and time is just invaluable. And so that's the first thing. The other thing is understanding consistency, because with the meditative arts, as I mentioned earlier, it's meant to be a way of life. And I always tell new students when they come into the academy, for within 5 minutes of walking in the door, if they want to do the meditation practice, that one of the requirements that we look for is that they're willing to commit to doing a 20-minute a day ritual, hitting a couple classes a week, and integrating some active practices into their day. And if they're not willing to do that level of commitment, this isn't the right place for them.
Right.
And while I'm sure that I could be turning business away by doing that, it's like, I don't feel like I'm doing them justice if I don't tell them that, because I believe that in order for you to really get benefit from the practice, you have to be willing to commit to yourself and have that consistency. And, through that consistency, you develop discipline, integrity, and perseverance. And these qualities that you develop in your meditation practice, they bleed over into everything you do in life, and your relationships and your work and your hobbies. And so having this understanding is really important. And then the last thing is, anytime somebody new comes towards the meditative arts and looking on this path or this journey, there's a reason why they came. And so I always tell people, what is drawing you here and why is this important to you? Because, maybe for you, it's you want to stay healthy into older age and watch your grandkids grow up, or stay mobile and flexible, or maybe you're dealing with stress and anxiety and panic attacks and you want to learn how to overcome this, or you're dealing with an illness, or you're an athlete and you want to improve your performance. But whatever that is, you got to really have a strong why, because no matter who you are, whether it's tomorrow, next week, or next month, there's going to be a time where that alarm's going to go off in the morning and you're going to be, I'll hit the snooze button. I'll do it tomorrow. And if you don't have a strong why, you're going to miss that. And you're not going to see the same value in there. And by doing this, and of the people that actually come into the academy and they do that, they do their 20 minutes a day and they do their active practices, if they commit to that for a year, I bet 98% of those students I see will do the meditation practice for the rest of their life, because they'll see so many benefits from the practice that they would be crazy to stop. And so if you think about those three things, your chances of being successful increase a lot.
And then thinking about this, so I'm sure that it's a question that you're asked all of the time, but how often should people meditate? Is this something that you teach? Obviously it is, but how often do you suggest?
So every day you should have a ritual practice, so like I mentioned, I like to see a 20-minute a day ritual as a starting point and something that you can do. The Dalai Lama once said that everybody should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. And, you've got to have that time where you can just stay connected to who you are, because in today's fast-paced society, you're distracted with cell phones and advertisements and work and all the stresses that we have in our life. And oftentimes we're walking around with a mask on because we don't want people to see how we truly feel, or maybe say something to hurt somebody's feelings. And we got all these barriers up around us. And sometimes you get so caught up in this way of living that you start looking at yourself in the mirror and you still have that mask on. And the meditative arts is one of those things that teaches us how to let go of those barriers and those masks and truly stay connected to who you are. And so that's invaluable.
Wow, thank you. That's really, really good. It's that I think it's a really good, insightful piece of information for people, and because often people say, but why should I do it? And I think you've summed it up beautifully. Thank you. And so I believe that you've got an offer for our audience today, Jeff.
Yeah, so anybody interested in the direction we're talking about, I have a free copy of my book out there. You can go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book and order a free copy. Also on my website, theyieldingwarrior.com, I have a online training program that teaches you how to integrate the meditative arts into your life, everything from movement practices to still meditation, standing meditation, breath work, the philosophy. There's all kinds of stuff in there. And then I also have a teacher training program up there. So if you own a yoga studio or a martial arts studio, or maybe you're a life coach and you want to learn how to hand down these arts and help people by teaching them the meditative arts, there's that for you there as well.
Wow, thank you. That's so generous. So I've got the QR code on the screen for the free book, so you can just click that. The website, I have been flashing it up through our conversation, the QR code, but it will also be on the information on the where this is streamed as well. So thank you very much for your generosity in relation to that, Jeff. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Can you believe it? We've definitely been in flow, Jeff, because I can't believe that it's the time already. So because we've only got a couple of minutes left, I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask all of my guests before we finish. So can you let us know or share with us what is your favorite quote and why is it so important to you?
The quieter you become, the more you hear. And I think this is valuable because it teaches us to stay connected to our center. And I feel like in today's society that people are losing touch of that. And I feel like it's so important to keep that consideration in our lives and keep that awareness, because if everybody did that, the world would be such a better place.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And it ties in actually with what we were talking about before about being present and listening as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for today, Jeff. I have really enjoyed our conversation. I knew that it would be really deep and rich, and I've had lots of aha moments. So I'm actually very, very appreciative of that and very grateful. So thank you so much. And I also just want to thank all of our amazing and dedicated audience, our sponsors, our supporters. And I hope that you all have an amazing weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. And Jeff, thank you so much. I look forward to keeping in touch with you. It's just been amazing.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Jeff. Okay. Thank you.